Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm starting a small series on gender, sex, and transgender identities. Though in the field of psychology it's fairly well understood, I feel I'd try to do my part in some kind of advocacy. Knowledge is power, and this series should include a whole bunch of knowledge. I'm testing a new style of referencing sources, so please let me know how it works for you. I want to start this video with a disclaimer. This is me in 40 years. I'm a cisgender dude person trying to learn and understand all this myself, so please call me out on any of my mistakes or misinterpretations. I'll try to include any corrections in the description. I also might use a little bit of humor to assist with learning and as entertainment. That being said, this is a serious issue, so keep that in mind going forward. First, before we go any further, we need to start with definitions of sex and gender. The main problem I see in this debate is that these definitions seem to be interchangeable in layman's speak. Think of things like gender reveal parties as an example. They're actually talking about revealing the sex of a child, then placing gendered stereotypes afterwards based on its sex. Talking about it in terms of gender is already cemented in our speech, which causes this confusion. Also, how we talk about these two seems to be interchangeable. Male and female seem to both denote sex and gender. This just further instigates the problem of sex and gender being tangled up. What I tend to see in debates is that more often conservatives will hear gender as meaning exactly the same as sex. Unfortunately, liberals, when debating, assume that conservatives are already aware of the distinction. This leads to nobody understanding anyone, and any chance of winning over the other party is lost. I'm going to start off with sex first. Sex, biological sex, or assigned sex, is determined by your sex chromosomes, hormones, and genitals. Sex can also be defined via primary and secondary sex characteristics. So this is easy, right? XX equals a female with sex characteristics normally associated with a woman, and XY equals a male with sex characteristics normally associated with a man. It's good that these categories are so nice and neat and never deviate. Well, actually it's a little bit more complicated than that. For about a few births per thousand, some individuals will be born outside of these categories. Yeah, it might sound like a few, but when you have about 4 million babies born each year, that's about 2,500 people per year who don't fall into these categories. That's just in the US. No, it's still not the norm, but these are people who deserve compassion as well as recognition. Sex monosomes only have a single sex chromosome, 45X or 45Y. Sex polysomes have 3 or more sex chromosomes, 47XXX, 47XYY, or 46XXY, etc. Adrenogenital syndrome can lead women with 46XX chromosomes to develop an outwardly male appearance. Oppositely, androgen insensitivity syndrome can cause genetic males to have the phenotype of genetic women, and thus have the outward appearance of one. Otherwise, they're normal. It's even been reported that these people with AIS were fine being raised as females without having sex reassignment surgery. People are affected not only by their genetics, but also by their environment. It's true that genetics determine the speed at which your telomeres shorten, which determines your lifespan. But you know what also shortens our lifespan? A tiger snapping into your neck and savagely tearing into your entrails. My condolences to those recently in tiger-related neck snappings. Gender is a social construction that varies across different cultures over time. It is based on cultural messages on what it means to be masculine or feminine. At the same time, gender is partially based on genetics as well. Though the male-female dichotomy is used, I feel that masculinity and femininity get the point across better. When you think of masculine and feminine, what kind of images come to mind? What kind of adjectives? What kind of behaviors? A typical male might be described as competitive, a breadwinner, strong, brave, and protective. An image might come to your head like Superman or Hercules or some other super muscularly dude person. They might do sports, hide their sad emotions, or be workaholics. A typical female might be described as compassionate, a homemaker, kind, patient, and nurturing. An image might be of Barbie or of Mother Teresa. Maybe she engages in gossip, people pleases, and hides any anger that she feels. I want to emphasize that what I just discussed is based off of US culture and my personal stereotypes. Male, female aren't the only genders in other cultures. Native Americans celebrate two-spirited people who encompass both masculine and feminine qualities. The Incans had third-gendered shamans and worshipped a dual-gendered god. It varies. Now, just looking at that list we came up with for US culture, try and see where you fit. Are you a man's man, a girly girl? How about a tomboy or a tomgirl? If I were to guess, you probably lie somewhere in between. A little project you can work on to help is to write down a list of adjectives you or others would use to describe you. Then for each of the adjectives, write down an M or an F for each adjective that is either masculine or feminine. I know for myself, despite the fact that I label myself as a dude person, most of the adjectives that I use to describe myself, or at least who I want to be, are more towards the feminine side. It's probably the case for many of you. It's almost as if gender is a spectrum. If I made $1 for every time I got called ma'am or miss over the phone at work, I might make enough to pay my bills. Jokes aside, personally, I don't get bothered by being misgendered. However, I'm immediately reminded of my teenage years where a majority of dude man had long hair. Strangers regularly mistook them for girls and called them miss. These guys would get angry and say, "I'm a guy." There was also a period of time where my lady girl peers cut their hair pretty short and would routinely get mistaken for guys. They'd correct them and say, "I'm a girl." I hope these examples help you with understanding what's coming up next. Remember how I said that there were androgen and sensitive genetic males that had the sex characteristics of women, and the opposite for genetic females with ADRENOGENITAL syndrome? They have the biological chromosomes of one sex, but have the physical appearance of the opposite. So what happens to gender here? As noted earlier, most of them accepted the way they were gendered by their parents and peers. Their physical appearance, not genetics, determined how they were gendered. Note that this is the opposite of the conservative notion that genetics determines how you are gendered. This is because doctors determine sex by genitalia most of the time, not by looking at your DNA. However, there was also those who experienced psychological discomfort with how they looked and were referred to compared to how their subjective experience was. That is, genetic males who looked female wanted to be referred to as males. They were assigned the female sex based on their genitalia, but their gender was more in line with their biological sex. Anyone whose gender identity differs from their assigned sex is known as transgender. As a thought experiment, it's not too tough for us to come up with a story of a girl whose parents wanted a boy and raised her as a boy towards more rough behaviors in sports. We can easily imagine her as being miserable, her parents forcing her to be something she is not. But can we also not imagine her being happy, never seeing a problem or a contradiction with her rough and tumble behavior and her body's appearance? From that, it shouldn't be too hard to imagine a girl whose parents always wanted a girl and raised her as such. This girl instead always wanted to play rough and be loud and hang out with the guys. But because her parents enforced the girl stereotype, her true identity was always being suppressed. She experiences psychological discomfort or dysphoria until she's able to accurately express herself. If she is unable to express herself as a guy because she has a woman's body, she might seek hormonal treatment in order to be allowed to express her true self, and for others to approve that expression. Lastly, there are some cases in which the identification of the gender opposite to the biological sex is so strong that people feel uncomfortable with their body. This is also known as gender dysphoria. This may motivate them to seek treatment to get their body to match their gender. However, I want to strongly note that not all people who are transgender want a sex change or hormonal treatment. In fact, most people who are transgender feel little to no dysphoria with their body and live perfectly normal lives. So if you don't know what to refer to someone as, which pronoun should you use? How do you know? Well, there are inclusive pronouns that address this issue like ze, zir, etc., but they can be a bit cumbersome, so I understand the resistance. The best advice I could give is to listen first and use what they or people close to them use. They is usually accepted as well, and of course you could always ask. If you misgender somebody, just apologize and use the right one, just like you'd do if you mistook a guy with long hair for a girl. A bit long, I know, but there was a lot of information to cover. Again, if I misrepresented anything, please correct me. I'll try to put the corrections in the description of the video. If you have any question as to mental illness's connection to transgender, please stay tuned for my next video. Spoiler alert, it's not a mental illness. Thanks for watching everyone, and do me a favor and have a good day.